Unit 17, this is dispatch. We have a code 420. Unauthorized nuptials in progress. I froze in place, my hand hovering over the wedding cake fork, as I listened to the radio operator trying very hard not to laugh. Even on my wedding day, my police instincts kicked in automatically. I adjusted the small police radio clip to my belt, a habit formed over 20 years of law enforcement. My eyes scanned the crowd, already anticipating the chaos, but nothing could have prepared me for the audacity of this situation. "Who called it in?" I asked, my voice calm but my mind racing. Dispatch confirmed the caller. Patricia Henderson, HOA president of Riverside Estates. Patricia, of course, claimed that our ceremony violated multiple regulations, including unauthorized floral arrangements and unapproved gathering sizes. I looked toward my bride, Sarah, who was mid-vow, hand raised, mouth open in shock. My 75 guests, many of them fellow officers or retired judges, were frozen in a mix of disbelief and amusement. I realized that Patricia had called the police chief, me, on his own wedding. My mind replayed the events that had led to this absurd moment. Sarah had convinced me that a simple lakeside wedding on my property would be perfect. Just string lights, homemade decorations, and the people we cared about most. Nothing fancy, nothing public, just our little celebration. I had triple-checked, no, quadruple-checked, with the county assessor to ensure my property was outside the HOA boundaries. There was no way she could enforce her rules here. But Patricia didn't care about facts. To her, any event visible from her HOA fell under her aesthetic jurisdiction. She was the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and sent violation notices for paint that was slightly off the approved shade. She had already harassed our florist niece over alleged non-compliant botanical arrangements and had tried to block the porta-potties, citing environmental impact concerns. Even the bakery that made our cake had received a cease and desist letter for creating an architecturally inappropriate dessert. On the morning of the wedding, Patricia had positioned herself on a small hill overlooking my property. She had binoculars, a telephoto camera, 3 clipboards, and what appeared to be a decibel meter. Every time someone laughed too loudly, she scribbled notes furiously. When the string quartet began, she shouted that we were exceeding acceptable ambient sound levels for a Saturday afternoon. As I watched, a part of me couldn't help but marvel at her dedication, or perhaps her obsession. The absurdity was breathtaking, and yet, in that moment, the reality of her interference could not be ignored. She was standing there, documenting every joyful moment as if it were a felony. Then came the 911 call. During our ceremony, she dialed emergency services, insisting that the gathering was illegal. My officers, Davidson and Park, approached cautiously, trying to suppress their laughter as Patricia narrated the scene. Like a courtroom witness in full action, she claimed that I, the police chief of Maplewood Township, was committing a criminal offense by simply saying my vows. Her words, unauthorized happiness, echoed across the lawn as she waved the gold-stamped cease and desist letter. My mind raced between disbelief and irritation. Guests were now filming, some whispering, others openly chuckling. Even Judge Harrison, officiating the wedding, raised an eyebrow in mild confusion. I took a deep breath, glancing at Sarah. She was holding her vows tightly, eyes wide but trying to remain calm. Our friends and family were bewildered, caught between enjoying the wedding and processing this bizarre HOA interference. It was clear that Patricia had escalated from petty complaints to full-scale harassment. Chairs, decorations, even the color of the tablecloths were now apparently criminal. The absurdity was complete. A police chief, on his own property, being told that his wedding was illegal. I felt a strange mix of anger, disbelief, and, if I was honest, amusement at the situation spiraling around us like a storm. Patricia marched up my driveway like a general inspecting troops, phone in hand, narrating every single detail as if the entire world were watching a criminal investigation. "This man is hosting an illegal gathering," she shouted at the top of her lungs, making sure the entire wedding heard her declaration. Officers Davidson and Park tried to stay professional, but I could see the corners of their mouths twitching with suppressed laughter. Guests had already begun pulling out their phones, capturing every absurd moment. Patricia handed me a gold-stamped cease-and-desist letter, each violation more ridiculous than the last. Unauthorized happiness, non-conforming joy, and flagrant use of baby's breath were just the first items on the list. I looked at Sarah, who was standing frozen in her wedding dress, holding her vows, trying not to faint from the absurdity. I tried to maintain calm, but inside, a storm of disbelief was brewing. I spoke slowly and deliberately. "This is my property. You have no jurisdiction here. You cannot stop a legal ceremony on private land." Patricia waved dismissively, as though my words had no meaning, citing visual range and a supposed precedent from 2019 where an HOA had shut down a birthday party 3 blocks away because the balloon arch was visible from their clubhouse. Sarah, finally finding her courage, stepped forward. "We have 75 guests, including a judge, city council members, and half the police department. Do you really want to disrupt a legal wedding?" Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through Patricia's self-righteous declarations. The guests cheered softly at her bravery. Patricia, undeterred, began pacing, measuring the wedding arch with a tape measure, claiming it exceeded the maximum allowable height for temporary structures. She moved on to the flower petals scattered on the ground, calling them littering, and then pointed to my elderly Aunt Martha, saying her hat violated HOA guest dress codes. Guests continued filming, some laughing out loud while others whispered disbelief. My niece Jennifer, the florist, tried to explain that the arrangements were simple and homemade, but Patricia interrupted her mid-sentence. She insisted that her surveillance and recordings were necessary for documentation and gestured at her telephoto camera, clipboards, and decibel meter as proof of her dedication. I watched in amazement as the situation grew more theatrical by the second. Even the string quartet looked confused, glancing at me, then Patricia, unsure if they should keep playing or flee. Patricia wasn't finished. She called 911 again, her voice rising in urgency as she reported riots, illegal alcohol sales, and exotic animals on the property. The reality was far tamer. 75 guests enjoying champagne toasts, Max the golden retriever wandering quietly, and children spinning in circles during photo sessions. The officers on site exchanged knowing glances, stifling laughter as they took notes and tried to remain professional. Social media had already started recording and uploading clips live, spreading the chaos across multiple platforms within minutes. Guests shared commentary, memes began to form, and the absurdity of Patricia's obsession with beige tablecloths, lavender candles, and ambient sound levels became viral fodder. I looked around at my family and friends, who were a mixture of horrified, amused, and incredulous at the spectacle. Patricia seemed energized, fueled by attention, and continued her march across the lawn, measuring everything in sight. Every laugh, every misstep, every flower placement was apparently a crime in her eyes. My mind raced, thinking of all the legal precedents she ignored, all the HOA rules she misapplied, and the fact that she was disrupting a wedding with a retired judge present. My officers remained calm but visibly entertained. Guests whispered among themselves, snapping photos, recording video, and live-streaming the event as Patricia documented the scene obsessively. Her claims became more elaborate, escalating from harmless violations to outlandish threats of legal action. She described the petals as dangerous litter, the tablecloths as non-regulation fabric, and the laughter as a criminal disturbance. The judge, still officiating, watched silently, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. Sarah's patience was impressive. She held her vows tightly, refusing to let Patricia overshadow our day. My niece Jennifer tried to intervene, explaining that the arrangements were safe, approved by family tradition, and part of our personal ceremony. But Patricia dismissed every argument. Her sense of authority grew with each passing minute, as if visibility from the HOA gave her ultimate power over reality itself. Patricia now measured the height of the chairs, claimed our music exceeded decibel limits, and accused guests of creating unsafe conditions for their own enjoyment. Social media viewers were already commenting in real time, calling the situation wedding chaos, HOA madness, and a Karen 911 episode for the ages. Her intensity never wavered. She scribbled notes, gestured wildly, and demanded compliance with imaginary codes. Guests were bewildered, some laughing under their breath, others whispering disbelief at the audacity. Every time I looked at Sarah, her eyes communicated, "We are not letting this ruin our day." My officers continued monitoring, documenting her actions, but silently cheering our patience. 6 weeks after the wedding, Patricia finally appeared in court, looking every bit as determined as she had on the hill overlooking my property. Her attorney tried to argue that she had merely been performing her duties as HOA president with a little too much enthusiasm. But Judge Harrison, the same judge who had officiated our wedding, was not impressed. The court listened as recordings of her 911 calls were played aloud. In one, she claimed there were over 200 guests, creating a riot situation. The actual number was 75. In another, she insisted we were operating an illegal commercial venue and selling alcohol without a license. We weren't selling anything. The champagne was only for toasts. The courtroom stifled laughter at the absurdity. Patricia's final call, however, was the most outrageous. She reported exotic animals running wild and claimed health code violations. The only exotic creature was Max, my sister's therapy dog, calmly sitting by her owner. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Patricia continued to argue that her actions were justified. She presented a full binder of evidence, including photos with detailed measurements, annotations, and even color swatches of tablecloths compared to HOA-approved shades. She attempted a full PowerPoint presentation complete with diagrams and charts. The judge had to intervene multiple times, stopping her before she could set up an easel for her full display. When she took the stand, Patricia made the situation worse for herself. She admitted to entering my property without permission for documentation purposes. She acknowledged that she knew I was the police chief, claiming that my violations were even more egregious because of my public position. Her tone suggested she believed aesthetics were crimes, and she seemed genuinely confused about why the court wasn't taking her side. The prosecutor calmly countered every claim with facts, pointing out the HOA had no authority over non-member properties and that calling 911 for a legal wedding was misuse of emergency services. The courtroom remained tense, with stifled giggles from some of the gallery, but Judge Harrison maintained order with quiet authority. The verdict came down swiftly. Patricia was found guilty on 3 counts of misuse of emergency services, 1 count of trespassing, 1 count of creating a public disturbance, and 1 count of filing false reports. The sentence included 200 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, 12 months of probation, and a strict ban on calling 911 except in real emergencies. Each violation of this restriction would result in immediate jail time. The HOA board, which had already seen the viral videos and received complaints from residents, voted unanimously to remove her from her position. They also issued a public apology to Sarah and me, clarifying that the HOA had no jurisdiction over non-member properties. Social media erupted once more. Clips of Patricia measuring tablecloths, flowers, and chairs, and shouting about non-conforming joy, became memes, GIFs, and even short music remixes. Riverside Estates quickly became known, nationally, as the place where a Karen tried to arrest a police chief at his own wedding. Residents complained that their property values were being mocked, though ironically, the coverage brought attention and laughter rather than actual financial loss. Patricia, undeterred in her mind, still claimed she had been defending property values and maintaining aesthetic standards. The judge, calmly reading her sentence, told her she should have considered the law before using emergency services as a weapon for personal battles. During sentencing, Patricia's face went through a dramatic series of colors, red, pink, and finally a deep purple that was definitely not HOA approved. She sputtered about the 200 hours, the $5,000 fine and probation, insisting she was protecting the community. Meanwhile, Sarah and I sat together, holding hands, thankful that the ordeal was over. Friends and family chuckled quietly, recalling the absurdity of the wedding day. The courtroom audience, which had included neighbors from Riverside Estates, seemed to revel in the poetic justice. Officers who attended the wedding quietly whispered how satisfying it was to see justice served after witnessing the absurdity firsthand. The HOA board began rebuilding credibility immediately, enacting new policies to prevent a repeat of Patricia's personal crusades. Patricia, now restricted in her actions, could no longer intimidate neighbors, call emergency services unnecessarily, or impose her personal aesthetics on anyone outside HOA boundaries. Residents shared their relief at being freed from constant scrutiny and needless harassment. The viral videos continued circulating, cementing the story of a wedding interrupted by an overzealous HOA president. The community collectively laughed, while Patricia's reputation suffered irreparably. My officers, friends, and family all looked at Sarah and me with knowing smiles, still teasing about the illegal wedding. Court proceedings, public apologies, and community reactions unfolded over several weeks. The entire saga was a lesson in how obsession and authority can be misused, and how humor, patience, and legality ultimately win. Patricia's misuse of power became a cautionary tale, both for her neighbors and for the broader public, who had followed the story online. Meanwhile, Sarah and I could finally focus on enjoying our marriage, surrounded by friends, family, and fellow officers who had witnessed every absurd detail. The events of the wedding day remained vivid in everyone's memory, a combination of chaos, humor, and justice in equal measure. Can you believe this HOA Karen actually called 911 at a wedding? Subscribe now to see more shocking, crazy, and viral Karen stories every week. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a wild HOA or Karen encounter. Comment below and tell us what you would do if a Karen tried to ruin your special day. Share this video with friends who love unbelievable real-life drama.